Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation, not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today I decided, look, I have time, I might as well try doing another one of these. As it so happened, I decided to talk about the other Netflix Sony movie that came out this year, the one that people were actually watching. Part of me didn't want to really talk about this movie, not because I have any kind of issue, but because I felt like, is it really worth talking about right now? Everyone's talking about it, it's very popular, and I don't want to feel like I'm just chasing a trend. But I figured it is something that is being talked about for a good reason. I really enjoyed the movie, and look, it always helps to get more views, so sure. I'm talking about K-pop Demon Hunters. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. So, why now? I could have talked about this months ago when it came out. I literally saw the movie the second it dropped on Netflix. Like, the second it hit midnight, I saw it because I am a big fan of animation. I don't think Sony makes the greatest animated movies. I think that they have had some really bad ones. But I will say that Sony has essentially been getting better. They've been experimenting. They kind of always were experimenting. Even if you go back to like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs or Hotel Transylvania, which is before Spider-Verse, the way those movies were animated was a lot different compared to what we saw from every other studio around. And yeah, there were some that were trying to do the cartoony thing as well, but I feel like those really leaned hard on it, and it's paying off now. And again, I don't think that they're necessarily perfect. Sony has released some okay movies, some duds. I thought Wish Dragon was a pretty good movie, but it's not really something that I really remember all that much. And of course, they released the Emoji Movie, which I don't think is as bad as everyone says it is, but I don't think it's all that good either. So I was already looking forward to K-pop Demon Hunters. I am not a K-pop fan. I don't know anything about it beyond just little things. Like, I know what BTS is, I know what K-pop is, like I know some of the bands, and I know what generally falls under K-pop. I have sisters who are into it. I'm not personally into it, but I was still interested because I'm like, look, Sony has been delivering, and the little snippets that we got from this showed a unique style that I think the movie really fleshed out. I'm really glad for that. So, K-pop Demon Hunters, movie I was going to watch anyways, despite not being a fan of the music, despite not being a fan of the whole culture around it. I got nothing against K-pop or Korea or anything like that. I am just not someone who's deeply entrenched in this stuff. So, once the movie came out and I saw it, I quickly realized, like, yeah, this is something special. Now, granted, I'm not going to pretend that I knew that this was going to be the hit that it is now. I didn't expect it to become the biggest hit on Netflix. I didn't expect it to become a movie that Netflix would put in theaters for a very brief window. I wish I had a chance to see it, and that it would do massive numbers for a 2-day limited release. But here we are. K-pop Demon Hunters is a big franchise now. Netflix has concluded that, yes, they will make more. They're gonna make, sequels. They're gonna do whatever they can to milk this franchise, which a little afraid about that, but I can see where you can take this. So I'm hoping that the best stuff happens with it and not the worst stuff. Honestly, the one that you should feel bad for is Sony, because, and I've said this before, Sony really needs to find their confidence in releasing more of their stuff in theaters, because they have not released a non-Spider-Verse movie in theaters since before 2020. I mean, I guess technically you would have the Peter Rabbit movie, but that's a live action movie with some animation in it, so I don't fully count that one. Yeah, we have not gotten anything in theaters, and at first it was kind of like, okay, well, I get it because of, COVID, some of these things just had to move that way. But there's a lot of movies that I'm like, okay, again, Mitchell's vs. Machines, I get it. It was during the height of COVID, and yeah, it kind of sucks because it's a really good movie. But then you get stuff like Vivo, you get stuff like, this, and you're just like, you could have released these in theaters. You could have made a good profit on these. And of course, now we kind of see that, yes, they could have made a profit on K-pop Demon Hunters. I know some people like to say that this movie owes itself being a hit to being on Netflix, and I just don't believe that. A lot of movies come out on Netflix that just get buried. No one went out of their way to watch something like The Willoughbys, which is a good animated movie that was on there. No one went out of their way to watch some of the other Sony stuff. I mean, I really love Klaus, and that was a pretty well talked about movie, but it stayed on Netflix, and no one really went all that crazy for it to the degree that they went crazy for this. So, yeah, no, I don't believe when people say that this would not have been a hit if it was just released in theaters. I don't think it would have been $1 billion movie. I don't know if any original movie is guaranteed to be $1 billion hit, but I will say that there is a strong chance that this thing would have made so much more than it already has. Because, look, this came out on the same day that Elio came out. There's no guarantee that that would have been the theatrical date that it would have been given if it actually went to theaters. But even assuming it did, Elio was not strong competition. It was just a Pixar movie that people saw, people forgot about. No one really cared all that much. And I don't even think it's all that bad of a movie, but I also don't think it's all that great of a movie, because it's just kind of a kid's movie about a kid who goes out in space and learns to love his family or whatever. Nothing groundbreaking. While this movie, which admittedly I'm just talking about all the stuff around it before even getting to the movie, because there is so much to cover on this movie. This movie has a lot going for it that just would have made it a hit. Like the fact that people are loving the songs. I don't think that it being released in theaters would have changed that. People talking about it and telling others like, hey, go watch this movie. Again, I think that would have still happened if it hit on theaters. You would have had people going on repeat viewings slowly and slowly as it became a hit. Like, I really see this in the same way that I've seen, granted, this hasn't happened too much since COVID hit, but there are movies where they become hits over time. They don't go all in on the first week, but over time they have consistent viewings going by music. You look at the original Frozen and the way it worked on the box office. That was a movie where people were consistently going out and telling other people, hey, this is actually a really good movie. You gotta go watch this. And kids, of course, were begging their parents to watch it again and again and again and again. That is what this movie would have done. I just know that's how it is based on just seeing its performance on Netflix. There's no way that people would have been like, okay, let's skip out on this movie after a week or so, because that's just not how these things work. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this thing barely got marketing from Netflix, and yet it still managed to rise to the top like that. I mean, it only had its trailer a month in advance, and yeah, there was times where they would talk about it ahead of time just to be like, oh, look, this is some of the things that are in the works. But in terms of like something that, we actually saw actual footage promoting it directly and not just, part of like a reel. Just imagine like if they had a theatrical release, they would have gotten an extra trailer. They would have gotten some ads, and that stuff would have gotten K-pop fans and, kids' attention that wanted to watch this. And of course, this is a movie that is appealing to even more people than just kids. It's appealing to adults who are into the K-pop thing, because there are a lot of adult K-pop fans. So, yeah, I mean, this is a movie that, of course, when it comes to any kind of action, music, that kind of thing, it's going to appeal to kids because kids like that stuff. But it is done in a style that a lot of people who grown up with stuff like, like action, anime or action cartoons, just action in general. When it comes to animation, like your Titans, your Avatars, your Justice League, Batman the Animated Series, it's stuff that appeals to those crowds of people, which are numerous. There's a lot of adults who remember watching those as kids, loving it and wanting more of that as they've grown up. So it doesn't surprise me that this thing is a hit, and I do think it would have been more of a hit had it been in theaters. But that's just me ranting on that. The fact that it's getting an Oscar run, it's, they're talking about how, because all the songs have been hit from this movie, like it's, the first time that multiple songs from a movie have been as big as this since, like, I remember reading it was like Saturday Night Fever, and it's like, that's crazy. Because there's been a lot of Disney movies that have iconic songs since then. And you're telling me that this is the only one that's had more than, like, I think they said it was like more than 3 songs within the same soundtrack that's gone really big, like in the Billboard 100 or whatever. Crazy. But yeah, it's really impressive stuff, and I think the fact that it's doing that means that it has a fair shot at getting the Oscar for Best Animated Film, getting the Oscar for Best Song. Of course, it doesn't need to win those things to be good, but it is kind of cool to know, like, hey, this is possibly going to be that big. And again, Sony, you really messed up, because apparently them, putting it on Netflix is one thing, but the fact of the matter is they also gave Netflix a lot of the rights to this. So even though they're still involved with the movie, they made it, of course. Netflix essentially has like final say of what they can do with this thing. So even if they decide to make a K-pop Demon Hunters 2, they can't just say, okay, well, this time we'll put it in theaters, because Netflix has the say on that. Though they should just put it in theaters. They had a big head. They should physically release it. Netflix, stop being allergic to what's guaranteed to make you some money. I'm just saying, putting things in theaters, giving movies and shows physical releases ain't gonna hurt your streaming service. People will still buy your streaming service because there's stuff that you just get a lot of advantage to. So I've done a lot of talking on what made this thing popular. So what exactly is K-pop Demon Hunters for someone who somehow has not seen it or missed out on the train? K-pop Demon Hunters is a movie about a K-pop band named Huntress, and there's like this whole thing about how for centuries there's been female singers who essentially keep out demons from our realm. The latest one is consisting of these three girls, Rumi, Mira, and Zoe, with Rumi essentially being the leader, and she's got a secret regarding her family. You figure it out real quick, but it doesn't matter. Point being, they're K-pop stars, they're stopping demons, and they're just about to essentially release the big song, the song that's gonna stop demons from fully getting into our realm. It's supposed to be like the big thing that's gonna perfect what they call a Hun Moon. The Hun Moon essentially being this barrier that keeps demons out, at which point the demons develop a new plan to stop the K-pop Demon Hunters. They realize, how do we stop the Demon Hunters? By beating them at their own game. They create a boy band that's also doing K-pop to seduce people into their side. The girls have to figure out how to stop the boy band. There's a forbidden romance going on in there. There's some great music. Honestly, it's not the most unique plot in the world, but I really dug it. I think a lot of people really love that simplicity, and sometimes simplicity is what works best when you're creating something new, unique, and fresh, because you want to create like the lore, you want to create the characters and just stuff that they could bounce off of. But in doing that, you want to keep it simple, just so you can avoid running into complicating it too much to make to have your audience confused by what exactly you're trying to do. So just having this be essentially a fight against good versus evil, a character who is born of two worlds, and realizing, hey, maybe the way we're doing this isn't exactly right. Like, this is stuff that's all been done before. We've had How to Train Your Dragon that, has your main character realizing, like, hey, maybe the dragons aren't so bad. We've had stuff where a main character struggles with the fact that they're half something else. Like, like in Shrek, you had Fiona, who was half ogre. It's all stuff that is there because it works, it's easy, and we're already doing a lot of heavy lifting, making you like these characters and this world. So I perfectly understand that. And, it's not even that I think that the movie is generic in any kind of way, because while it is essentially doing these plot beats that we've seen 1,000 times before, it is remixing them in a way where it feels fresh. Like, okay, the main character is half demon. Okay, are we gonna find out who her parents are and how that influenced her? Like, no, we're just gonna learn a little bit about it. Maybe that's explored upon in the sequel. Maybe it's not. And to be honest, I know we're getting sequels, but if this were for whatever reason just a one and done, it wouldn't matter. Like, I'm not really one of those people who are like, oh yeah, we need to have a sequel in order for this thing to work. It's like, no, this is a good enough story even on its own. So if it had for whatever reason not been the big hit that it became, I'd be perfectly fine just knowing like, hey, this is what it is. Because realistically, while it would be nice to know like, okay, more about the father and how exactly the father and the mother got together, ultimately, I'm just like, I don't care. That's a good enough setup for what this character is going to be going through. And it becomes a big plot thing where she has to learn how to accept herself and maybe understand that, hey, maybe not all demons are exactly the same. Of course, that I do think can feel a little undercooked because they still have to defeat the big demon bad guy. And by the end of it, even though there's like, without going into too much spoilers, but everyone's seen this movie, so whatever. Even though there's essentially a demon who becomes, like the bad guy who sacrifices themselves for the greater good and never really lands on like, okay, well, what if these people, these demons just need some way to coexist with us. And that's perfectly fine. I think that it is a problem in this movie because it kind of feels like it's going there, but it is a lot, and we do kind of need to wrap this story up. So for a first outing, even if it never gets a sequel, which it will, but even if it never got a sequel, I wouldn't mind if we just never really learned that. It would have been one of those things that's kind of imperfect. Lots of movies are imperfect. Guys, it's okay for a movie not to fully address everything, even if you might have an issue with it not addressing everything. And the reason why that is because at the end of the day, the whole point of it is just her struggle and accepting herself. The demon stuff is just the way we understand why she's struggling with this, but you could have changed it out to anything else. You could have changed it to be about her sexuality. You could have changed it to be about maybe her appearance, which it kind of is, but, in a more normal, real way, not in a fantasy way, and it would have carried over. The two friends, Mira and Zoe, are really just there for not only comic relief, but for her to have her emotional connections, realizing like, hey, look, these people will still love you even if you're different, that kind of stuff. It all works, and I think one of the major things that made this movie work and made it stand out is that, while it is a movie about girls fighting evil, and, fun K-pop music, which I'll get into in a bit. The thing that I think really connected to me and probably connected to a lot of other people who are either not into K-pop or are, but, maybe not as much as some of these super fans are, is just, the idea of like, hey, look, this is still a story about a person going through their own personal struggles. And that kind of stuff is always a good way to hook in your audience. People really neglect that an emotional hook is almost always much better than some unique original idea. If you can get me to care about a character's struggles and make me relate to whatever issue they have, you're set. And that's really where the movie, I think, shines, is that it really sets up this emotional drama of her being of two worlds, being true to her friends, and then, true to this guy that she meets who makes her start to realize, like, hey, maybe if this guy is not as evil as I think he is, maybe me being part demon means that I'm still good regardless of that part of me. And again, it might be flawed in some ways because it doesn't fully commit to, doing the whole like, hey, demons can be good thing. Whatever. We're probably going to see that in the sequels. We're probably going to have more of her father in that. And, it's stuff that doesn't really matter for that now. I do think one of the greater scenes in this movie that I feel like could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but for what it is in there, it's great, is that she essentially is adopted by one of the previous Hunter girls, a friend of the mom's. So she's getting raised by her. And it's very interesting stuff. It's stuff that I think is handled a little bit better here than in something like Encanto, if we're going to talk about abusive parental figures. I still think we could have had a little bit more. That being said, when you actually see Rumi fully, like, her friends have found out that she's got the side of her, and she comes to the adopted mother and just being all like, hey, you're the one that was telling me that this was bad, and making me feel like shit, and, all this stuff. Her calling her out, and I'm like, that's great stuff. We never actually go back to her to see whether or not she apologizes or anything like that, but it's something that lingers on, and I do think that works, especially for this movie. Again, even if there's no sequel to it, it works because we're left with a whole, like, well, did she forgive her? Did she just abandon her? We don't know, and it'd be great to know, but at the same time, sometimes the magic of storytelling is that we can fill in what we feel like at that moment. So if you feel like she doesn't deserve to be redeemed, by all means, she's not redeemed. If you feel like she eventually gets forgiven, you could say that she does. And of course, when we get to a sequel, they'll probably address that too. But I do think that with the way they presented it here, it won't matter. Like, for this one movie alone, you'll enjoy with how they did it. And once they get to the sequel, assuming and hoping it's good, you'll see like, okay, well, they addressed it in this way. And again, it'll probably work out in a way that works fine for all parties, or maybe just one party. You never know. Big thing, of course, with this movie is the music. A lot of people love the music. And as someone who doesn't really care for K-pop, I can't really say that I don't get why, because, whether it's listening to Soda Pop or Golden, which is the song that everyone's going crazy for, Takedown, these are all really catchy songs. And I'm like, this is the stuff that I kind of wish that Disney would have been doing, like, especially since they're the ones who are always doing like these musicals and whatnot. Like, not necessarily doing these songs, but more exploring with what kind of music they do. Like, it always feels like whenever they get one big musical, they're like, okay, let's make all the other musicals we have into this. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it'll give you one or two good songs, but it never gives you a full soundtrack. This is one where I feel like the whole soundtrack is such a joy to listen to. I personally love what it sounds like. It's such a unique vibe, and it goes with what the movie is. Like, hey, look, this is a movie about K-pop. Great. All this movie, this movie sounds like a K-pop album, but it also relates to the character struggles. It relates to the drama. And with that, it's a nice blend that just feels very unique, and it doesn't just feel like, okay, we're just doing the same Broadway style music every single time. Within the last decade, most Disney musicals have felt like, okay, we're just doing Frozen again, or we're doing Moana again. And I know that's partially because they've had the same composers and there are other movies, but it's still just like, dude, it'd be nice if you expanded on it. Like, hey, with a horrible movie, regardless, but like with something like Wish, like, hey, if you're gonna emphasize that this is, gonna have like some Spanish influence, why not make the music feel more like something that you would find in Spain instead of Moana 2.0. So yeah, the music is just really great. I mean, every time you get that Soda Pop beat going, it's just nice. You want to just move to it, and that's the whole movie, really. You just want to move to it. It really makes it so that there's not a lot to just hate about this, It's like, yeah, I can tell you that I feel like the movie gets a little rushed by the end. I wish they would have explored some of the concepts a little more, but I can't say that I really hated any of it. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie. A lot of movies aren't, but I also don't feel like it's a movie that has a lot of glaring flaws to it. Like, yeah, I could tell you, oh, this is not very unique. I could tell you that this could have been done better. This could have taken its time more, but it's almost all stuff that I'm like, describing it as a problem is just me saying, okay, well, this could have been done better, which is not always the greatest, criticism. Like, I prefer when I can critique something and say, like, hey, this could have used an extra scene or whatever, like, where it's more detailed. I feel like a lot of the criticism I have for this movie is just stuff where I'm like, this could have been done a little bit better. Like, the only real thing is just me saying, like, hey, they could have fleshed out the whole demon thing a little bit more and whatnot. But I don't know. I just feel like it's so basic that I just don't have a problem with it. Like, if this is the movie that wins the Oscar for Best Animated Film this year, granted, it's not like we've had a lot of great contenders, but for what it's worth, it's still a really good one to win. I do think that there could be better animated movies around the corner, whether it's from foreign markets or just, in general. But so far, this is the strongest contender. And if it were to win, just looking at it, I wouldn't mind. Like, even if there's better movies once the year's over and this is still the winner, I will still totally get it, because there's a lot to love about this movie. And there's a lot I fully get about this movie that a lot that people are going to like. So, yeah, I don't know. I really dug this one. I think the animation is great. It has a really nice, like, people describe it as Spider-Verse, which makes sense because it's Sony, but, it feels more like anime than comic books, and it still has a very unique style onto its own. The characters are great. I like the fact that all the women in this, you can tell when they're wearing makeup and when they're not wearing makeup. That's something that you don't really notice a lot in animation, but in this one, you can actually see, like, okay, there's a difference to how their skin looks when they're wearing makeup versus when they're not. The women are allowed to be goofy. Like, there was a thing that I remember years ago where some Disney animator said that women are hard to work with because when it comes to animated women, they often are forced into just doing, like, okay, is this woman gonna be pretty in this shot? And pretty much they focus on making the woman look beautiful at all times, which I understand, but at the same time, I love the fact that in this movie, it's like, yeah, the women are always beautiful, but they're allowed to look weird. They're allowed to have big goofy eyes. They're allowed to react in ways that makes them look like horny little goblins versus almost always looking like this stiff, lifeless robot. And not to say that Disney animated women look bad, but they just don't look as energetic as these girls do, even when they're made to be goofy. Like, again, those girls, yeah, you get the idea of, like, they're always made to look beautiful. Versus this, where it's like, yeah, they may always be beautiful, but they're not afraid to make them look weird. And I love that. And then, of course, they're just great designs overall. Like, the women are given great designs. The boy band is given a great designs. There's a tiger and a little crow that accompany, like, the main demon boy. And, that's great stuff. There's some great 2D effects in there. Like, the main demon villain, Guima, is kind of, made it in a way where he looks kind of like a 2D fire or something like that. It's very simple, but at the same time, it's very cool to look at, and it's just very unique. And I don't know, this movie is just very unique, regardless of the fact that it has plot beats and story beats that feel very similar to other things. Like the fact that the characters are like, hey, look, here's the energetic one that's kind of dumb but bubbly and well-meaning, and then the more serious one, and then you got the leader. Yeah, this is stuff that we've seen before, but just the way they mix it all together is nice and unique. I love K-pop Demon Hunters. That's all I can really say. I say, watch it if you haven't, but I don't know anyone who hasn't watched it at this point. And yeah, if you haven't, for whatever reason, just go ahead and watch it now. It's worth it. With all that said, thank you for listening. This has been I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, and I'll see you again next time. Yeah! 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 Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. Ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast. And give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.